Hello and welcome to Latveria Library, where I go over all my favorite comic book stories, characters, and lore. Now, as I've said in previous videos, my obsession lately has been Hellboy and the incredible universe Mike has created around the character. I've been reading through all the side stories I can find, and of course loving them, but also being inspired by them to make videos. And so today, I want to explain more of this beautifully dark world and its creatures. So like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy the content, and let's start the video. Mike Mignola truly has made something unique with Hellboy, taking old fairy tales from all over the world and putting his own twist on them, making them feel familiar yet at the same time brand new. Not to mention crafting some truly interesting characters like our main hero, that feel almost more like an old friend than a comic book character. It's really no wonder why these stories have accumulated such a following. And so in the last video, we went over the main villain of the universe, Odrud Jahad. This time, we will be going over the villain that strikes the most fear in the hearts of the creatures throughout the universe, Nimue, Queen of Blood. And before you say it, yes, I agree, Odrud Jahad is a far more terrifying villain. There are literally points in the story where Hellboy is hunted just so he cannot even by mistake unleash this monster. But Odrud Jahad is terrifying in a different way, and actually is more worshipped as a god than feared. Although he does come to play a role in why Nimue is so feared, which we will get to. But first, let's start at the beginning. Nimue, also known as the Lady of the Lake, lived during the reign of King Arthur, and was the lover to no other than Merlin himself. Though the wizard was completely and madly in love with her, the feelings were not reciprocated, for Nimue had seduced the old mage to learn all of his secrets. Merlin, too blinded by love, of course shared everything he knew, eventually making her the most powerful witch in Britain. After she had learned all there was to know, she used Merlin's powers against him, burying him alive where he still remains to this day. Unfortunately, this would be her downfall. One of the greatest powers, maybe the greatest, she had obtained was the ability to hear and understand all things in the earth, as well as all the spirits in the air. But one voice she heard louder than all others, the seven-headed dragon of chaos, Odrud Jahad. Without the guidance from Merlin, she was unable to control this new power, and unfortunately, the voice of the dragon drove her mad, in turn causing all other witches to turn against her in fear. They poisoned their own sister, then chopped her into pieces, scattering them throughout the world in the hope of her never being able to be resurrected. But her pieces would not stay separated, always finding a way back to each other. So finally the witches had no other choice but to bury all of them together in a secret place, telling no one outside of the coven the location, until Hellboy intervened. See, after Hellboy had defeated Hecate, the current queen and most powerful of witches, this left the coven leaderless, almost powerless, destined to fade away into the dark corners of the world. The only thing left for them to do was to plead with him to become their new leader, since the blood of the Lord of all witches, as well as a witch, ran through his veins. Who but Hellboy should lead them? But of course, Hellboy, being the demon he is, told them to go screw themselves. Afterwards, all hope seemed lost. The witches seemingly had no other options, until an old enemy of Hellboy's approached them with one final opportunity. Gruiga, a creature who cares for nothing more than exacting his revenge on Hellboy, who he blames for his current pig-like form he's stuck in, comes to the witches and pleads with them to tell him where Nimue was buried, because she is the only one who can not only restore the power of the witches, but the entire fairy realm, which of course was a lie. Gruiga only wants to use Nimue to exact his revenge on Hellboy, everybody else be damned. Nevertheless, the coven felt as though they had no other choice, and told the pig what he wanted to know, the first person ever outside of the coven. Nimue's tomb was in a cave underneath an old forgotten church, located in a massive sealed hole in the middle of the floor. It was guarded by a giant who tries to warn Gruiga of the dark days to come if he does this. though it did no good. Too blinded by revenge, and with a letter in hand from the coven, nothing would convince him otherwise. The giant now had no other choice but to obey the coven's orders, but so terrified at what was to come, after he had fetched the box with Nimue's remains, he crawled down into that same hole and sealed himself shut. Gruiga thought him to be a fool for this, but honestly, that giant might be the most sane person in this story. A month later, and Gruiga still had not found a way to resurrect the Queen of Blood. With each passing day, the giants, as well as other supporters of this new queen, became more and more restless, seemingly believing that he had lied about this new ruler who would bring glory back to the fairy realm. But just when it seemed as if his dream of being an elf again, as well as revenge on his enemy, was fading, Gruiga is approached by the demon Astaroth in human disguise, who hands him the blood from an entire village. He pours every drop in the box that held Nimue's remains, bringing her to life once more. Rage still filled the Dark Witch after all these years. All she could think about was her sisters who poisoned her, who betrayed her. Though most had already drowned themselves when they had heard of Nimue's return, a few were either very brave or very stupid, and made the trek to see their resurrected sister. Nimue, in need of an army, decided to forgive the witches of England for what they had done, except for the witch she had trusted most of all. She reached out and touched her cheek, putting some kind of hex on the old witch. Her body contorted as she begged for a death that would never come. And so now that her pound of flesh had been taken, Nimue awaited patiently as her army marched ever towards her. She could see them far away, crawling out of the hollows of the earth, the creatures once thought to be nothing more than fairy tales. Goblins, giants, demons. Soon, this will be their world once again. The first to arrive was an ambassador for the King of Jutland, with a message that stated him, as well as the other kings of the north, recognized Nimue as their new queen, and to show their words were true, they gifted her a jewel-encrusted golden crown, made by the little goblin ambassador himself. But instead of accepting this generous gift, she says to break it, make it into a knife to be used to cut out his king's heart, then burn it in a furnace and use the ashes to forge a helmet made of iron, for she was not a queen of witches any longer, but a goddess of war. The little goblin then, with tears running down his face, scurried off and did exactly as he was told. A little while after this, Hellboy had pulled the sword Excalibur out of the stone for the purpose of raising his own army against Nimue. Her army, however, still had not arrived, and so Gruiga pleaded with her to change him back, so he alone could defeat Hellboy and prevent the resurrection of King Arthur's knights. But then something hit him at that same moment, like a ton of bricks. If Nimue had the power to do so, she would have already changed him back. She simply was not at full power. This accusation enraged the goddess of war, causing her to cast aside the pig. And so Gruiga had betrayed not only his own race, but the entire world, all for his childish lust for revenge. The last of his people, Queen Mabe, has been slain, her blood used as war paint for Nimue's assassin, while her army, who were now near, will see the rivers run with the blood of humans and fairy creature alike. And Gruiga's only reward will be to live long enough to see it all happen. Finally, the time had come. Nimue's army had arrived, ready to destroy the world in the name of their goddess of war. After all, this was her destiny. She had been chosen by Odru Jahad himself, who set her above all others who had served him. For Nimue would be his vessel. Out of her, the seven-headed dragon shall be born onto this world. But this was not what Nimue had signed up for. It was not what she wanted. Unfortunately, not even the great Queen of Blood can turn back time. Slowly, Nimue began to morph into some unrecognizable creature. Her limbs began to stretch, and her mind started to warp. By the time Hellboy had made it up to the top of her tower, thanks to the Baba Yaga, who he gave his eye in return, there was nothing left of the Dark Witch. What he faced now was the dragon, Odru Jahad. The two began to exchange blows on the very top of the Dark Tower, Hellboy giving it all he had, using anything he could find as a weapon, though it would seem he was having no effect on the thing that was once Nimue. It caught him underneath its massive claw, and right then, as he lay in a pool of his own blood, it seemed as if our hero had lost, and the prophesied Ragnarok was upon the world. When suddenly Hellboy is gifted a sword made from one of the crows on Nimue's iron helmet. It had represented a part of her that was still human, that hated and feared what she had become, so it was only fitting that it be the thing to slay the dragon. So Hellboy picked up that sword and tore through the beast, knocking it from the tower. While this battle was happening, on the ground, Hellboy had rejected Excalibur, feeling as though it didn't feel right, which he was right about. A man named George had been chosen by God himself to wield the sword and command Arthur's army in the final battle. He has waited almost 100 years for this, and the time had finally come. George and his undead army marched forth and defeated Nimue's army, as well as losing his own life. And so, Odru Jahad and his evil army had been defeated. Hellboy had saved the world for now, but unfortunately, it was not over. Nimue's spirit fought and clawed as 500 drowned witches tried to drag her to hell. Still in death, she refused to give up. If her soul was bound for hell, she would take Hellboy with her. She ripped out his heart with her last bit of strength, killing our hero. But fear not, for this is not where our story ends. The champion of man battling the dragon is just the beginning of Ragnarok, despite the outcome. Next, monsters long buried will rise again and spread across the earth, burning everything until all that's left is ash. And out of those ashes, a new world will be born for Odru Jahad and his children. In conclusion, Nimue's lust for power drove her to madness, leaving her vulnerable for Odru Jahad's manipulation. Like many before and after, she believed she was special, and so set the world on the path of destruction, all in the name of her master, who in return for her devotion, rewarded her with a painful death. She's really what Hellboy could have become, if he hadn't been found by his stepfather and friends in the BPRD. Their love and kindness changed him into the man he had become, a man who has all that he could ever want, no need for power or riches, and so he rejected the destiny he was told by so many he would succumb to. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you did, and I'll see you in the next.